Hey everyone, sorry for being a little bit late. As you can imagine, getting from one hotel to the next is very, very challenging. Um, so I only have 11 minutes and 55 seconds left. So really what this is going to be about is a little bit of thought leadership. There'll be some slides to kind of reference, but we'll go into just what do I mean by not competing for cloud talent in this craziness of trying to procure cloud security talent. A little bit about me. Spent over 5 years at AWS within cybersecurity, fraud prevention, account takeover division groups. So I've seen a lot of account breaches, cloud security incidents occur on AWS itself. So as we think about AWS and we think about the amount of data available to you, it is vast. AWS is not getting easier by design. It's not getting simpler. It's getting more and more complex. And what we're seeing is the data behind these services, as well as the data needed for identifying threats, detecting threats, is becoming larger and larger and larger. Just focusing on these three for a second: CloudTrail, VPC flow logs, config. To find someone who knows these data sources intimately, knowing how to normalize the data to extract insights, to extract threats going on in your environment, is very challenging. You may find a cloud security expert who knows how to architect in AWS. They may be very, very specialized, but ask them to normalize data and find insights out of data using these data sources. It's very challenging. It is extremely challenging for them to do that. At Uptix, what we're doing is we're taking that pain point, we're taking that headache of trying to normalize your data, trying to understand your data, trying to have you become the expert in this data, and we're taking that on. And one of the areas we're doing that is something called cloud detection and response. Now, CDR is a relatively newer term out there. I'm not going to read word for word, you can read those, but essentially it's looking at your data, finding the behaviors in your data, and showing you the context, explaining the context of what is going on in that data. If you think about AWS, all AWS is a bunch of APIs that are connecting all the services. That's all it is. Focusing on CloudTrail, finding a normalized pattern in CloudTrail, differentiated from what threat actors do in your environment. Not everyone knows how to identify that, how to see that within an environment. I speak to senior security engineers at companies, and I'll say, hey, how do you secure a workload? How do you architect for a workload? And they can rattle off, several different ways, and they can give me an architectural diagram. But as soon as I say, how do you escalate privileges? How do you exfiltrate data? How do you deploy remote code execution using Systems Manager? And they don't know how to do it. So what we're doing is we're taking this data, we're thinking like a threat actor, so that you don't have to worry about finding someone who can think like that. You don't have to find someone who understands all the intricacies of cloud security, especially as it comes to detecting these threats within your data streams. Again, as I mentioned before, there are multiple data streams within your environment. Normalizing that data is a challenge, but extracting those insights is a even bigger challenge. So as I mentioned before, there are several ways to escalate, to detect threats in your environment. Here's a very simple example. 5 API calls can elevate permissions within an environment. All of this shows up in your CloudTrail logs. What we do is we detect the patterns, and we're mapping out all the various patterns that allow someone to escalate privileges. And then we will display it in a very contextual way for you, your team, to easily understand to read it, and most importantly, to take action. We'll also provide remediation steps. Again, going back to the beginning, trying to hire a cloud security expert who understands this, who can contextualize it, and present it to you in a way that you can action it is very challenging. Very, very challenging. And we've seen this. We've spoken to hundreds of customers, and we're seeing the pain point of trying to find a specialized security resource who can think like a threat actor, who can think in these lines of thought. There's another one, a very sophisticated way of escalating privileges. They start up an EC2 instance, they deploy a reverse shell, it connects back to their system, and they're able to curl the data on the instance that is creating the reverse shell. Again, this is very complex for a lot of companies, a lot of security team members, even senior security engineers, on how do you escalate privileges using an IAM role, using a reverse shell. Well, what we want to do is say to the customers, hey, Mr. Customer, Mrs. Customer, you don't need to think about that. Your team doesn't even need to think about that. Let us think about that for you, and we'll provide it in a meaningful way that has the context as well as the actionable outcomes that you can take action on, such as how do you remediate this? Where did it happen? Which EC2 instances? Which instance did it connect back to? Exfiltrating data. How do you exfiltrate data in AWS? A lot of security engineers don't know how to do that, or how do you detect for that? They may explain to you, oh yeah, you just copy from one S3 bucket to another S3 bucket in a different account. Well, what else? What are those APIs? What are the exact sequence of APIs that a threat actor will have to go through to do it? In this example, they take a snapshot of an EBS volume, they modify the instance attribute, snapshot attribute, and with that modification, they add the optional argument, optional parameter of sharing it with an external account. We detect that for you. We'll surface it in a meaningful way that explains to you in layman terms what just happened, and we'll share with you the account ID that this data was shared with. And here's a screenshot of what we're talking about. So going back to the very first threat that we identified, policy reversion. As you can see, we're showing you the 5 APIs in a timeline. We're giving you the what, describing in layman's terms. We're giving you the metadata, such as what access key was used or what IAM role was used. And what we've just finalized is, has that IP address, the source IP address, been seen in your account in the last 90 days? Has that user agent string been seen in your account in the last 90 days? So we want to give you confidence that what we're surfacing out of your logs is a true positive. Most companies don't need to share this type of data with account IDs external to their organizational ID. So again, going back to the original statement, we are there identifying these threats, thinking like a threat actor, and surfacing it to you in a very simplistic, meaningful way. So you don't have to go and hire 10 security engineers, with each security engineer specializing in 1 or 2 domains within AWS. We're doing that for you. So you can go worry about your core business and focus on running your business rather than focus on becoming a security company. Some companies may be security companies, but most companies out here don't want to be security companies. It's a very stressful role to have, but a very meaningful role to have once you show customers the outcomes you can deliver for them and how you can make their lives a lot easier. So as you go through this journey and as you think about your security posture, think about how are you detecting meaningful threats? How are you surfacing threats that are known by threat actors? They exhibit these behaviors of calling certain APIs in your environment that lead to a desired outcome. The analogy I like to give is when Google Maps first came out, it didn't have all the roads mapped. Well, what we're doing is we're mapping out all those roads to these desired outcomes. Privilege escalation, data exfiltration, ransomware. To do ransomware, there's a lot of reconnaissance that happens in an account. We're mapping out that reconnaissance. So as soon as it shows up in your logs, we'll detect for it, we'll surface it, and then we'll present it in a way that allows you to take action or have your team take action based on the remediation steps that we actually outline for you within the cloud detection and response. That's all I got. Any questions, comments? No? Well, thank you for your time. Enjoy the rest of the show. Thanks.